What's going on, everybody? Thank you for watching Up Close. As many of you know, moments ago, P. Diddy's attorney came out and said to the press that his client will remain in jail.
So we made a bail appeal to Judge Carter. It did not go our way. The fight continues. We're not giving up by a long shot. I told Mr. Combs I'm going to try and get his case to trial as quickly as possible. I'm going to try and minimize the amount of time he spends in very, very difficult and, I believe, inhumane housing conditions.
So what does that mean? He will not be released until the trial date happens. Now, this is the second time within 2 days that P. Diddy has been denied the opportunity to be released. And we're not sure how long a trial date will be set, but P. Diddy's attorney did say that he was going to move for a speedy trial. But the person who understands all of this better than most is defense attorney Charles Ford. And we're going to be talking about this case and a few other things coming up right after this. Attorney Charles Ford, welcome to the show, man. As we've been talking about Mr. Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Brother Love, whatever you want to call him, he's dealing with a heck of a case against him right now.
This is when the feds come after you, they come after you with all, guns blazing. What happens here is that prosecutors, first people have to understand that U.S. attorneys, prosecutors, DAs, they don't really take to trial cases they feel that they can lose, that they're going to lose.
Right.
And so now the feds is a little bit deeper than that. They don't charge people unless they feel they have a great case.
Right.
And I've done at least maybe 10 federal cases, and your best bet, unless you can just somehow use some type of statutory means or they've violated some type of due process, you almost have to settle that case. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And in federal cases, cooperation is the key to getting a better deal for your client. And that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about the live, what took place after the hearing when Sean Combs' attorney came out and really did not want to say a lot.
Right.
Because that's part of the cooperation that you want. You don't want to go ahead and say negative things about the case. You want to talk about, maybe he talked about the conditions that his client would be in while he's in jail. He wanted a speedy trial so he wouldn't have to be in jail for any long period of time. Right. So those are kind of the general things that he wanted to talk about to put his client in the best position if they start working on a certain plea deal.
Well, to your point about how feds operate, specifically the Southern District in New York, their conviction rate is 95, almost 96%. And to your point about why that is, they're not coming with the full wrath of their office, going up against somebody like a P. Diddy who has billions of dollars to fight them on a legal tip and go after him in this way if they didn't have the goods. Because a lot of people are saying, the case is kind of weak. What say you?
Based on what I've heard, they have a lot of physical evidence. A lot of times cases are on circumstantial evidence, and sometimes circumstantial proof can get you found guilty quicker than actual physical evidence. But they have a lot of scientific proof with videos and things that they've discovered, like guns, and also I've heard that they have actual witnesses who are going to testify on their behalf. So they have the whole bushel basket of things that are necessary to convict someone. Now it's going to be up to Sean Combs' attorney to look at all that evidence and see where he can kind of break down some of the credibility. And this is a credibility case. How they got the information, the witnesses, what do they have to gain in doing and testifying against Sean Combs. So that's where I think the attorney is going to attack this particular case. He's going to look at the credibility of all the evidence, the credibility of the witnesses. Credibility is a big thing because you have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a big standard. And a lot of folks don't understand the legal premises of it, but you start with, you start with at the top, you got beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a high standard. Then you got clear and convincing evidence, it's a little less. Mm-hmm. Then you got preponderance of an evidence where it's a little less, more than 50%. Then you got probable cause and then reasonable suspicion. So you have to climb all those ladders to get to, beyond a reasonable doubt. And if there's any doubt in this case, then the jury has no choice but to plead to come back with not guilty. And I think you've correctly identified it. He has all these resources.
Yeah, right.
Like OJ had like 5 or 6 attorneys. Right. He was found not guilty. Here you got Sean Combs, and I've been really impressed with his attorney thus far. The times I've seen him speak, the times I've seen him, how he's handled some of the process. So I think he knows what he's going to do. He's going to probably look for a legal team. And if you get a chance to talk with anybody, tell them I'm available too.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's going to look for a legal team that can attack different parts of the case. You're going to have people who can do good closing and opening arguments. You'll have a person who can do well on direct examination. You have somebody who can do well on cross-examination. Mm-hmm. So that's how you pick your legal team. And one of the things that I've done before is I pick juries. Mm-hmm. You're gonna have someone who can get a good prototypical juror and go through the jury process, the voir dire process, and pick someone they feel could be receptive to their argument.
Apparently, from what I read, there is a lot of evidence relative to video. People who may have participated in these alleged freak-offs and all of these things that have occurred. What would you do if you had evidence on tape showing your client doing all these crazy things? Like, how would you defend that person?
Well, see, one of the things about a good defense attorney is you file motions. First of all, I'm going to try to get rid of all of it. I'm going to say that it was not gathered properly, that they used illegal means, they didn't have probable cause or reasonable suspicion to come into the place. And I was concerned about that when I first saw the March raid, is that you got to have probable cause to enter someone's home. So I would question that. I would file so many motions to see if I could get rid of the evidence. Okay. Then if you can't get rid of the evidence, then you're going to try to minimize it and try to just allow them to use parts that are relevant to that particular case. And then try to get the witnesses who are on there to say different things than what the tape is saying. And I think a lot of that is going to be, was it consensual or not? I mean, you were there, you drove yourself there, you flew there, you took Uber, Lyft to get there, or you accepted a ride from Sean Combs' limo driver, and those types of things. And so maybe it was consensual.
So if he can prove that it was consensual, then a lot of those charges kind of go away. Is that correct?
Yeah, and see, and there's a lot to, I've been practicing law for over 35 years. I've done, murder cases, attempted murder, some of the high level cases. And those are the first things that we look at, is how can we technically get rid of the evidence? And I filed a lot of motions to suppress evidence, and you can win those, because a lot of times I think police officers, governmental officials, they don't gather information properly. So that's where you got to look at first. Mm. Did they make any mistakes? Did they follow all the protocol that is necessary to make that legal? And if you can find something at the beginning that was not proper, then we have a concept called the fruit of the poisonous tree. So everything after it is thrown out too.
Right.
So if the stop of the vehicle, when you're trying to gather information that you found in the car, but if the stop was improper, then even the things that you found don't go into evidence.
Gotcha.
So,
and that's very interesting, because traffic stops happen quite often in this state. And
Yes.
so that's something that people really need to be cognizant of, because
Yeah.
that's major right there.
I do a lot of DUI cases. I won a lot of DUI cases, and that's the first thing I look for is, was that person properly stopped? They stopped. I had a client that was stopped because they said that he didn't have his seatbelt on, but he was already parked when you stopped him. So
Right, right.
there's some real technical things that you have to look at, and that's one of the things that I want to do. I work for the Fulton County Public Defender's Office, and I filed motions all the time.
Take your criminal defense attorney hat off for a second, right?
Okay.
Just attorney, not even an attorney. You're just a person, and you hear these charges. Some of them are so depraved that you say, man, what were they doing? 100 or what is it, 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube and all of this kind of stuff. What would when you first heard it, taking your lawyer hat off, what did you say?
Well, it's hard for me to take my lawyer's hat off, but I'm going to take it off in this manner. And we've done research on it, most people are plaintiff oriented. So most people, I would say 75 to 80% of the people in this country, or anybody who's heard this case, they've already found Sean Combs guilty.
Right.
So that's just how society is. When we hear charge, or they'll say people wouldn't charge individuals unless they did something. When I'm doing the first question I ask when I'm doing voir dire, trying to pick a jury, and these are lay people, they're not attorneys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first question I ask them, how many people in this box of jurors feel that my client, because he's sitting next to me, is guilty? Because he's already been charged, he's been called a defendant. How many of you out there feel that this person is guilty? Now, nobody's supposed to raise their hand. Am I correct?
Right. So
that's just an opening for me to say, hey, juror number 5, why didn't you raise your hand? Well, they'll say something, well, I haven't heard all the evidence. A person is innocent till proven guilty. So then you start putting checks by that person's name because they have a concept of, they want to hear evidence. They want to make sure that they're interpreting things properly so they can make a good sound decision if that person is guilty or not.
Mm-hmm.
You won't believe this. I've done so many trials in Michigan, and I started doing trials in Georgia. And my first one that I won, I got a chance to ask the jurors questions, and they like my mannerism and things of that nature. So you want to be, as a defense attorney, you want to be very mannerable to everybody. You don't want to have a negative impact. Mm-hmm. But my second trial that I asked, who thinks this person's guilty? That's just my opening question. Nobody raises their hand, and I went down for my next question, and my client said that person raised their hand. And I'm like, oh, juror number 6, you raised your hand. He said, yeah, I just think that because, they got, they called me in here and this person's sitting there. I just think he did something, but then for me, that's a good statement from that person, because now I can get that juror kicked off for cause. I don't have to use my 3 preempts to get, I'm saying, Judge, I want that person off for cause. And then Judge will say, oh, I've already kicked him off. Because people have to go in with that neutrality of saying this person is innocent until proven guilty. And even with the mountain of evidence that we feel that, or people feel that the federal government has, they still have a tall mountain to climb, high mountain to climb, because they've got to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And and so that defense attorney gets an opportunity to show why that evidence should be considered, or why it shouldn't be given the credibility that's necessary to find a person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Now, moments ago, as we saw together, the defense attorney came out and said his client did not get bond, and he is now going to be remanded in jail in federal custody until the trial date. Now, I was told that a trial could be 6 months to a year from now. Are there any other motions, speaking of motions, are there any other motions that the defense attorney can present that could supersede the decision both yesterday and today not to give P. Diddy his freedom?
Yeah, I think that I think he was clear that he was going to appeal the judge's decision. And so that's always a good place to start. okay, is to appeal. You can make motions all throughout before the trial, but one of the things is the longer a person stays in jail, sometimes it's easier to get a bond because they've already done jail time. Then you might do house arrest. You know, they can monitor, ankle monitor, those kinds of things. The
Mhm.
appellate process isn't to retry and look at all the information again, is to see if the judge made some technical errors, heard evidence that he shouldn't have heard, or she shouldn't have heard, or they didn't give enough credit to certain evidence. So it's the appellate process is a technical process, not to retry the case over, but to look at if the judge properly reviewed the information and made a sound decision. The factors in this: is this person a risk of flight? Is he harmful to society? Those kinds of things. I think the prosecutor or the U.S. attorney made real strong arguments. You know,
Yeah.
there are people who were possibly drugged, so that's kind of harmful to society. Okay, is he a risk of flight? Well, he's got millions of dollars. Even though you have his passport, he can jump on his private plane and leave.
Right. Right.
But if you have him under house arrest, ankle monitor, you'll know where he's at. So I think along the way, and especially if the defense attorney can show that Sean Combs being out of jail is more valuable to his case than him being in. And I think the attorney also mentioned that the New Jersey, I think, jail that he's going to be in.
You're right. Sussex County, it's a little bit more conducive.
It's more accessible to attorneys. See, one of the things I do not like about certain jails, if I have to go in and visit my client, is that I got to go deep into the jail to visit my client. Then they got to close the doors behind me. That's one of the things I liked about Fulton County Jail when I was here. I just went up in the elevator and I went into a room and my client was in front of me and we could do our business from there. But when I was in Michigan, I had to go into the jail. They had to lock it. I really didn't like that.
Yeah. No, I understand.
So, yeah. So if this facility where Sean Combs is going to be housed has good accessibility for his attorney to come in and ask him questions, and so he could be helpful to the case. But that's your best witness is your client.
So I thought it was odd the way that this whole thing occurred because P. Diddy knew that these charges was coming, right? It wasn't a surprise to either him or the attorney. He actually came into town 2 weeks earlier in preparation to surrender himself, which was supposed to be Tuesday, yesterday morning, and they superseded that and picked him up Monday. And I don't know if a lot of people understand why that matters, but explain why if you turn yourself in, that is easier to get a bond opposed to them having to come pick you up.
Well, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's just is your cooperation, especially when you're dealing with federal cases. Cooperation is essential to your case. So there was no reason for him to be out there on the run, dodging police and those kinds of things. That's why it was tough on the OJ case. Remember, he had that Bronco ride, and the judges felt kind of concerned that he wasn't going to. He wasn't a good candidate for some type of bond where he could be released.
Right.
So OJ spent the entire time while he was in trial in jail.
Right.
So at this point, P. Diddy felt that maybe it'd be better if I turned myself in, that I could maybe get some type of bond that I could pay and put and at that point or post, and then that way I could be out while the trial is going on. So that was a step in the right direction for him to see if he could get a good bond. I turned myself in, and I think I heard where his attorney used that. He wasn't on the run; he came to you.
Right.
Which is a good argument.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how he's being handled right now. Because as you know, you come from a luxurious $1 billion lifestyle, and you're now committed to a 4x4 cell or whatever the dimensions are. And from all of accounts of what his attorney is saying, that the conditions are bad. I'm certain that this is not a cakewalk for him. You know,
it's not going to be cakewalk for anybody.
Right.
I mean, even someone like yourself, who's you're a law-abiding citizen, you have an honest job, you're making an honest wage, and then someone puts you in jail. That's taking away your livelihood and your privileges.
Right.
And I was just talking to a friend of mine when I said, you'd rather be in a home with one bedroom and whatever, but being able to come and go as you please. I think no matter what our lot is in life, how wealthy we are, how poor we are, we got to follow the rules. We got to abide by the law. And it really bothers me sometimes that we've seen people who are who are wealthy at higher levels really not take that into consideration.
Right.
Because they think maybe they're somewhat beyond the law. But the issue is we all should be abiding by the law. It boggles my mind that a person at the status of P. Diddy could even be allegedly have these things happen, because there's all allegations at this point. There's nothing been proven, but we should be helping people. We should be using our money to further a person's idea, your own ideas, but we shouldn't be in a position where we're just kind of taking people down.
And I've had this conversation with many other people, because this has been a hot button conversation since the raids of all of his homes, right? I've had the opportunity of working with him, Russell Simmons, all of those guys when I was back in New York. And to see this guy, when I met him, he was an intern for Andre Harrell at Uptown Records. He was washing cars. And to see a guy that went from that to a billion-dollar mogul is inspirational. So in my opinion, before all of this, he was the most consequential producer, director, whatever, in our lifetime. So there are people who are saying that this is a witch hunt, because that's what the legal system does to our brothers. What do you say about that?
Well, I don't agree or disagree with that. I mean, I think that it's relevant in America that there's a disparity in how people are charged. There's a disparity. One of the papers I think I wrote way back in law school was that, only 5% of the people incarcerated have degrees. 5%. So we know the answer to keeping people from being incarcerated, and that is, education.
Absolutely.
And it's education. But the issue is when we only have 50% of African American young men who are graduating from high school in urban areas, and that means that where are they going to go? Where's the other half going to go? That 50%, they're not going to get good jobs. They're not going to be in the service community, because even to go to Burger King and McDonald's, you're going to have some type of formal education, right?
Right.
High school at least, or at least getting ready to get a high school degree. So it starts there. It starts there where we're seeing the graduation rate for minority males is really going down, and we got to do something to pick that back up. I think there's some efforts that are happening, but we need more of it. We need more of it so we can have more people. When I was on the school board in Lansing, I was trying to find, alternative education, where people who weren't doing well in school, how do we get them to graduate?
Right.
People who are going to graduate, but people who are not going to graduate, we got to get those numbers up.
Right.
So this whole this whole thing is a witch hunt and those kinds of things. We just have more percentage wise. We just have more minority males who are available to do criminal activity.
Yeah.
And one of my concepts is that, a lot of prisons are private. I think the attorney mentioned, or I read it, that he's going to a private facility.
Right.
And so private facilities need clients. Am I correct?
Man, you know what? We could go off on a whole nother level.
Yeah. I mean, that's for another day. I know
I understand where you're going with it, because let me tell you this. As a young Black man out here, businessman, understanding that it's always my job to get new business, right? If you got a legal private jail, it's always your agenda to get more business. So when things are privatized like that, I have a real problem with that. public facilities, you know, I mean, the city, state, whatever, they run it, federal government. Okay, you create a state crime, you go to state jail. Federal
Right.
crime, you go to federal prison. But when you, you know, you do a crime that could kind of be, you know, probation slash prison, and you get prison because the way the system works, we don't look out for the money people. Now you end up in a privatized prison. That's not justice to me. Now,
Yeah.
you know, I know you're on the side of the law, and I am as well. But when it comes down to privatizing prisons and jails, that's where it gets a little dicey for me.
Yeah. Well, that's a key point for us as defense attorneys. You know, a person commits a crime, people always ask you, why are you representing the person who's committed a crime? It goes beyond that. First of all, the Sixth Amendment, you know, a person has a right to an attorney. So even if I don't represent them, somebody's going to represent them.
That's right.
But the representation is that you want the punishment to fit the crime.
Right.
Okay. You steal a loaf of bread, you shouldn't do a year in jail. Am I correct?
That's right. Right.
So anybody who commits a crime, you want the punishment to fit the crime. And that's what we do here in America. We want that to happen. And so that's why you're innocent until you're proven guilty, because you want to make sure that you have all their ducks in a row to make sure that that person is the one that's going to jail or the death penalty or spend life in prison without parole. You want to make sure that. But I'm a person that wants to defend people, because I know there's cases like, I don't know if you heard of Jimmy Gardner or not, but yeah, he spent 27 years in prison falsely accused.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, so it balances itself out. I mean, there's for those people who are falsely, and there's people who take deals because they didn't do it, but they're just afraid that they're not going to get 20 years versus the 2 they're offering them.
Right.
And so, so it kind of weighs on you. That's why I spent most of my career being a defense attorney. I want you to be able to prove that my client did the things you said they did.
Well, Attorney Charles Ford, man, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And just so that people have your information, I don't want to leave it up to me to say it. Tell them how you can be reached and how they could get some advice in criminal defense from you.
Well, I'm licensed in Michigan and Georgia. So I have a Michigan telephone number 517-281-9716. Also here in Georgia, 770-485-2217. And now if you want to catch me on my website, it's all you have to do is go to www.attorneycharlesford.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me, attorneycharlesford.com. And so if you want consultation, I'm definitely free for that. I've done criminal, a lot of criminal cases, but I've practiced in just about every area of law. So if you need some information, want to talk about it, please feel free to call me.
Attorney Charles Ford, this is not going to be the last time that we talk. This case is going to go on and on and on. There's going to be a lot of different questions that people have, and I'm going to lean upon you to get some of those questions answered. And there are other legal cases that are happening that we need to get some clarity on as well.
Yeah, well, Bill, I would love to be on your program. You do a lot of good work. I appreciate the things that you do. We need, you're a Black-owned business that I really respect, especially in this industry. I'm sure there's not a whole lot of people like yourself, and I think you're getting that story out there, and we really appreciate what you do because we need to be heard. Okay?
I appreciate you as well, sir.